She was 19 years old when they burned her. She had been dead for 25 years when her trial was declared unjust, and nearly 5 centuries had passed before the church formally proclaimed her a saint. Joan of Arc is perhaps the most mythologized figure in French history, which is precisely why so much of what truly happened to her has been obscured. History has a habit of smoothing the sharp edges of truth. We remember the fire, yet often forget the ink, the cold and calculated machinery that condemned a 19-year-old girl. To understand Joan, we must look beyond the altar and return to the trial records. She was not merely a martyr. She was one of the most politically disruptive figures of 15th century Europe. Her death was not simply an episode of war. It was the deliberate use of legal process for political ends. How did a peasant girl from the marches of Lorraine persuade a desperate dauphin to entrust her with the fate of France? Part of the answer lies in the psychology of crisis. In 1429, Charles VII was not a ruler secure in confidence or authority. He was a claimant marked by exhaustion, faction, and military humiliation. The Valois cause seemed close to collapse. By accepting Joan, Charles did not merely listen to a visionary. He recognized, whether instinctively or reluctantly, the political force she represented. She could do what councils, captains, and procedures had failed to do: restore belief. Her presence offered something armies alone could not provide: legitimacy, momentum, and the appearance of providence. She became, in effect, the most extraordinary asset available to a weakened crown, a military and symbolic intervention clothed in a young woman from the provinces. When Joan was captured, it was no longer the sword that mattered most, but the law converted into an instrument of destruction. At the center of that process stood Pierre Cauchon, Bishop of Beauvais, a man of considerable intelligence, administrative skill, and unwavering political allegiance to the Anglo-Burgundian cause. Cauchon did not seek Joan's death alone. He sought her discrediting. For a prisoner executed merely as an enemy combatant might become a heroine. A prisoner condemned as a heretic could be used to poison the memory of everything she had achieved. The trial was therefore constructed as more than a prosecution. It became an attempt to reverse the meaning of her life. Legal forms were observed where useful, ignored where inconvenient, and manipulated where necessary. Joan was denied proper counsel. Her appeals to the papacy were set aside. The conditions of her imprisonment violated the norms ordinarily expected for an ecclesiastical prisoner. Even her clothing, the male dress she repeatedly described as practical necessity and protection in custody, was transformed into evidence of spiritual deviance. For Cauchon, jurisprudence was not a path to truth, it was a weapon sharpened by procedure. If Joan could be branded fraudulent, inspired by error, or corrupted by heresy, then the political meaning of Charles VII's coronation at Reims could itself be called into question. Yet the trial produced something its architects could not fully control. Again and again, the judges encountered not the ignorance they expected, but a formidable clarity of mind. They sought to trap Joan in technical theology, where trained scholars presumed themselves invincible. One of their most famous questions was whether she knew herself to be in the grace of God. For any ordinary defendant, the question was perilous. To answer yes risked presumption. To answer no invited suspicion. Joan replied, "If I am not, may God put me there, and if I am, may God keep me there." It was an answer of remarkable precision, not learned in the schools, yet equal to the moment. Not the language of academic subtlety, but of disciplined intelligence under extreme pressure. She did not defeat the court, but she refused to be diminished by it. And here the record becomes quieter, though no less revealing. Charles VII, who owed Joan a great deal, did not move decisively to save her when she fell into enemy hands. No dramatic ransom effort emerged. No urgent campaign altered her fate. The reasons remain debated. Perhaps caution, perhaps political calculation, perhaps the hard instinct of monarchy, which values stability above gratitude. By the time of Joan's captivity, she may also have become a more difficult figure for the crown to manage. Charismatic, unpredictable, and bound to a sacred mission beyond ordinary statecraft. Whatever the mixture of motives, the result is clear. She stood largely alone. Only later, once the political landscape had changed, would the monarchy support the process that annulled her condemnation and restored her name. Joan did not fall solely beneath the weight of English power. She fell at the intersection of competing authorities: occupation, ecclesiastical law, dynastic caution, and institutional fear. Those who condemned her hoped to extinguish not only a person, but a precedent. Yet the smoke that rose from the pyre at Rouen did not mark an ending. It marked a beginning. For Joan demonstrated that legitimacy could be challenged, that power could be unsettled, and that a single disciplined will, animated by conviction and sustained under terror, could force kingdoms to reckon with forces they did not command. She was 19 years old when they burned her. Charles VII, the king whose coronation she had helped make possible at Reims, did not act decisively to save her. 25 years later, when the political danger had passed, her condemnation was overturned. History has given Joan a halo. What history has been slower to acknowledge is the cold political calculation that surrounded her life, her death, and her rehabilitation. And what that calculation still tells us about power, faith, and the way nations manufacture memory.
Merutta.com